Maria had never planned to be in that tall glass building on that particular night. Her life was usually simple and quiet. She worked part-time in a small bakery on the corner of her street, baking bread in the morning and serving customers in the afternoon. Her days were filled with the smell of fresh rolls, the sound of children asking for cookies, and the gentle chatter of neighbors who stopped by for a warm cup of tea. She didn't have much money, but she had peace, and that was enough for her. That evening, however, her best friend Clara called her in a panic. Clara worked as a cleaner in one of the biggest office towers in the city. She had been working double shifts all week and now had a family emergency that required her to leave town immediately. "Maria, please, can you do me this favor? Just for tonight. I'll explain everything to my boss tomorrow," Clara begged, her voice tight with worry. Maria hesitated at first. She had never cleaned in such a place before. She had cleaned her home, her bakery, even helped neighbors from time to time, but the thought of walking into a glittering corporate building felt overwhelming. Still, Maria couldn't let her friend down. She agreed, quickly put on the uniform Clara dropped off for her, and tied her hair back in a neat ponytail. The uniform felt a little loose and awkward, but she reminded herself that it was only for one night. She kissed her little brother goodnight, promised her mother she would return safely, and then made her way to the city center where the office tower stood. When she arrived, she stopped in awe. The building seemed to touch the sky, its glass windows sparkling under the streetlights like 1,000 diamonds. The automatic doors opened smoothly, and she stepped inside, her footsteps echoing against the polished marble floor. She felt suddenly small in the grand lobby where fountains gushed gently and paintings hung on tall walls. Security guards at the desk gave her a polite nod, and she tried to look confident even though her heart was beating quickly. Maria carried the cleaning cart through long hallways, pushing it carefully so it wouldn't make too much noise. Every corner she turned revealed something new: shining elevators, meeting rooms with glass walls, and desks filled with computers that hummed quietly in sleep mode. She couldn't help but admire how beautiful everything looked. At the bakery, the tables were old and chipped, but here everything was spotless, modern, and glowing. When she finally entered one of the top-floor boardrooms, she froze for a moment. The room was enormous, with a long wooden table stretching across the center, surrounded by tall leather chairs. A chandelier sparkled above her, casting a soft glow on the glossy floor. Maria swallowed nervously and got to work, wiping surfaces, dusting corners, and gathering up papers left behind. She was so focused that she didn't notice someone else sitting by the tall window until she accidentally dropped a stack of files. The noise startled her. She looked up quickly and saw a man seated in the corner. He wasn't dressed like the other employees she had seen earlier rushing out of the building. He wore a simple shirt with rolled-up sleeves and dark trousers, no tie, no jacket. He looked relaxed, almost as if he belonged there yet didn't care about appearances. His eyes met hers, and for a moment Maria felt embarrassed. She whispered an apology, bending quickly to pick up the papers. To her surprise, the man stood up and walked over to help. "Here, let me," he said gently, handing her a neat pile. His voice was calm, warm, and nothing like the sharp tone of the managers she had overheard scolding their juniors in the hallway earlier. "Thank you, sir," Maria said softly, unsure if she was allowed to talk to him. She expected him to leave, but instead, he remained there, watching her work. "You don't usually work here, do you?" he asked after a pause. Maria shook her head, a shy smile appearing on her face. "No, I'm just covering for my friend tonight. I usually work in a bakery." She hesitated, wondering if she was saying too much, but he seemed genuinely interested. "A bakery?" His eyes lit up, and he leaned against the table casually. "That sounds like a nicer job than being here all day." Maria chuckled, surprised by his honesty. Most people she knew thought office jobs were prestigious, but this man spoke as if he envied her simpler life. It's hard work sometimes, but yes, I love the smell of bread in the morning. It makes me feel at home. The man nodded slowly, as though he understood something deeper behind her words. He didn't ask for her name, nor did he introduce himself. Instead, he simply started talking about the city lights outside the window, how they always made him feel both proud and lonely at the same time. Maria listened quietly, her broom paused mid-air. She had never expected such a conversation to happen here, especially with someone who clearly belonged to this glittering world. Minutes turned into nearly an hour as they spoke about little things, favorite foods, books they had read as children, places they dreamed of visiting. Maria forgot she was in a uniform and supposed to be invisible. For the first time that night, she felt like she was seen not as a cleaner, not as a temporary worker, but as a person with stories worth sharing. When the clock struck midnight, Maria realized she had to finish her tasks. She excused herself politely, but the man smiled and offered to carry the trash bag out for her. She laughed nervously, shaking her head. "You don't have to do that. This is my job tonight." "Still, I don't mind helping," he replied, already holding the bag with ease. Maria watched him walk beside her down the hallway, wondering who he was and why he seemed so different from the others. He wasn't arrogant, he wasn't dismissive, and most of all, he didn't look down on her. When they reached the lobby, he set the bag down near the disposal area and turned to her. "Well, Maria from the bakery," he said with a playful tone, even though she had never told him her name. She blinked in surprise, and he grinned. "You mentioned your bakery earlier. I'll have to come by someday." Maria smiled, though her cheeks warmed with shyness. "You'd be welcome," she said softly, unsure if he was serious. He nodded once, then walked away into the night, disappearing through the glass doors like a shadow. Maria stood there for a moment, her heart strangely light. She didn't know who he really was, but something about him stayed with her long after he left. As she returned to finish her cleaning duties, she thought about how odd the night had been. She had stepped into this building nervous and small, but somehow ended it feeling a little braver, a little more alive. She had met a stranger who didn't treat her as less, and that, in itself, felt like a gift. Maria didn't realize it then, but this one simple shift, this one favor for a friend would change her life forever. Maria thought her unusual encounter with the man in the boardroom would be the last time she saw him. After all, she was just covering for Clara, and it seemed like a chance meeting. Yet, when Clara's family emergency stretched on longer than expected, Maria found herself covering the shift again and again. At first, she felt nervous returning to that shining glass tower, but deep inside, a small spark of curiosity had formed. She wondered if she might see him again. On her second night, she entered the building with a little more confidence, carrying her cleaning cart through the familiar hallways. She told herself to focus on the work, not on anything else. But fate seemed to have other plans. While wiping down the marble counters in the lobby, she noticed someone sitting on one of the benches near the fountain. He was leaning back, reading a book, his shirt sleeves rolled up just like before. Her heart skipped for a moment, and she almost turned away. But then he looked up, smiled warmly, and waved. "You're back," he said simply, as if he had been expecting her. Maria felt her face flush. She nodded politely, trying not to appear too eager. "Yes, my friend still couldn't come, so I'm helping again." "That's lucky for me," he replied, closing his book. He stood and walked toward her, not with the rush of an office worker late for something, but with the easy calmness of someone who actually wanted to be there. Maria tried to keep her hands busy with the cleaning cloth, but soon they fell into conversation again. He asked her more about the bakery, curious about the kind of bread she baked, and she told him stories about how children would press their noses against the glass display in the mornings, waiting for the first batch of rolls to come out of the oven. He laughed softly at her description, as though he could see the scene clearly in his mind. Over the next few nights, their meetings became a pattern. She never asked why he was always there so late, and he never explained. Instead, they simply enjoyed the moments they had. Sometimes they met in the cafeteria, where he would sit across from her at a quiet table. Once, he even surprised her by bringing 2 cups of tea from the vending machine. Maria found herself opening up to him more than she ever expected. She told him about her younger brother, who dreamed of becoming an engineer, and about her mother, who worked tirelessly to keep their home running. She admitted how she sometimes felt small in a world that valued wealth and power, but how she always believed kindness could make anyone rich in the heart. He listened with such attention that Maria forgot she was just a cleaner in a borrowed uniform. His eyes never wandered, his questions were gentle, and his laughter felt real. One evening, she decided to bring something from her world into his. She wrapped up a few extra pieces of fresh bread from the bakery and carried them with her to work. During her break, she found him sitting in the quiet lobby and shyly handed him the small bundle. "I thought you might like to try it," she said softly, almost embarrassed. "It's nothing fancy." He unwrapped it with genuine excitement, inhaling the warm smell. "This is more than fancy," he said, taking a bite and closing his eyes for a second. "This is comfort. Do you know how long it's been since someone shared food with me like this?" Maria laughed nervously. "Surely people must offer you plenty of things." He shook his head, chewing slowly. "Not like this. Not something made with care. You don't realize how rare that is." His words touched her in a way she couldn't explain. She had never thought of bread as anything more than her work, but to him, it seemed like a treasure. That night, they sat side by side on the marble steps of the lobby, eating bread as though they were old friends rather than two strangers from different worlds. But not everyone saw their bond with kindness. Some of the office staff glanced at Maria with disapproval when they saw her speaking with him. Once, a young assistant walking by muttered under her breath about cleaners not knowing their place. Maria lowered her eyes, embarrassed, but before she could step away, he spoke up. "Is there a problem?" he asked firmly, his tone calm but carrying authority. The assistant stammered, shook her head quickly, and hurried off. Maria looked at him in surprise. He smiled gently at her afterward, as though assuring her that she mattered. From that moment, Maria realized he was different from anyone she had ever met. She didn't know who he really was, but she could see that he valued people for more than their job titles or wealth. His kindness felt genuine, his presence comforting. One evening, as Maria dusted the shelves in the executive lounge, she began to hum a tune without realizing it. It was a song her mother used to sing while cooking. When she turned around, she saw him standing quietly in the doorway, listening. For a moment, she felt embarrassed, but he smiled softly. "That's beautiful," he said. "You should sing more often." Maria laughed nervously. "It's just an old song. Nothing special." "Everything about it is special," he replied, his voice low but certain. Her heart fluttered at his words, and she quickly busied herself with the cloth in her hand. She couldn't explain why she felt such warmth in his presence. It wasn't just his kindness, it was the way he truly saw her, not as someone invisible in a uniform, but as a person with dreams, with feelings, with worth. Every night they met, Maria found herself looking forward to their conversations more and more. She didn't even realize she was falling into something deeper. For the first time in a long while, she felt like someone cared about her stories, her laughter, her silence. She didn't know his whole story, but she knew she was starting to carry him in her heart. Little did she realize that he was carrying her in his as well. Maria's nights in the tall glass tower had started to feel strangely familiar. What began as a favor to her friend Clara had now become something more. Every evening she entered the building with her cleaning cart, she felt a quiet excitement in her chest. She told herself it was because she was growing used to the work, but deep inside, she knew it was something else. It was because of him. Daniel, that was the name he had given her, was always there. Sometimes she found him sitting in the cafeteria with a cup of coffee, waiting as though he knew she would come. Other times he appeared unexpectedly, leaning casually against a railing or sitting in the lounge as if the building belonged to him. He never explained why he was there so late, and she never asked. Instead, they simply fell into the habit of spending those hours together, talking about everything and nothing. Maria didn't realize how much she had started to rely on his presence until the night she didn't see him right away. She pushed her cart through the polished hallways, cleaned the conference tables, and emptied bins, but her eyes kept flicking toward the corners of each room, searching for him. When he finally appeared near midnight, she felt a wave of relief wash over her. She tried not to show it, smiling lightly as if it didn't matter, but inside her heart beat a little faster. Over time, the whispers among the cleaning staff began to reach her. Older cleaners spoke in hushed voices about the CEO of the company, a man who rarely showed himself during the day but was known to sometimes walk the halls at night. They said he was mysterious, different from other businessmen, and that he liked to see things for himself instead of relying only on reports. Maria laughed off their stories at first. Surely, someone like that would not be the kind man who shared bread with her and listened to her sing old songs. Still, the thought lingered in the back of her mind. One night, while she was wiping down a glass wall, Daniel came up behind her quietly. She nearly jumped at the reflection of his smile. "You're always so focused," he teased gently. "Don't you ever get tired?" Maria shook her head, chuckling. "It's not so hard. I'm only here a few hours. My friend does this every day. She's the one who deserves praise." "Still," he said softly, "not everyone would help like you do." His words made her cheeks warm, but she quickly turned away to hide it. "It's nothing, really. We all help where we can." Daniel leaned against the wall and watched her work. "You know," he said after a pause, "you have a way of making even the simplest things seem meaningful. Like when you talk about bread, or family, or songs. You make them sound like treasures." Maria laughed quietly, her hands slowing on the cloth. "Maybe because they are treasures. I don't have much else, but I have those." He didn't answer right away, but when she looked up, his expression was thoughtful, almost sad. She wanted to ask what was on his mind, but before she could, another cleaner entered the hall, giving them a curious glance. Maria quickly stepped back, suddenly self-conscious. She reminded herself that to everyone else, she was just a cleaner, and Daniel was, well, she still wasn't sure who he was, but he clearly didn't belong in her world. The next evening, Daniel surprised her by carrying 2 cups of tea from the cafeteria. He placed one on the cart as she worked. "For you," he said simply. Maria blinked in surprise. "You didn't have to." "I wanted to," he replied with a small smile. "You deserve it." As she sipped the warm tea, she felt an unexpected comfort. She didn't know why he was always so kind to her, but his presence made the long nights feel shorter, and the empty halls feel alive. One night, as they sat on the balcony that overlooked the city, Maria finally gave voice to the thought that had been bothering her. "You're always here. Don't you have your own work to do?" Daniel chuckled, leaning on the railing. "Maybe this is my work," he said vaguely. Maria frowned playfully. "You're not going to tell me, are you?" He grinned. "Not tonight." She rolled her eyes but couldn't help smiling. She didn't press further. Whoever he was, she felt safe with him, and that was enough. But the mystery only deepened. There were little signs she couldn't ignore. Once, she saw a group of employees stop suddenly when he walked past, nodding respectfully as though he were someone important. Another time, She noticed how even the security guard in the lobby straightened up whenever Daniel entered. Maria brushed it off, convincing herself she was imagining things. Still, the whispers about the CEO crept back into her thoughts. The turning point came one evening in the executive lounge. Maria was cleaning when Daniel spilled his coffee on the polished table. He reached for a napkin but fumbled, and she quickly stepped in to help. As she wiped the surface, she laughed lightly. "You'd never survive as a cleaner," she teased. "It's a good thing you don't work here in that way. This place must be full of serious bosses and CEOs who'd faint if they had to clean their own mess." Daniel laughed too, though his smile carried a flicker of guilt. "Maybe you'd be surprised," he murmured. Maria tilted her head, curious at his tone, but he quickly changed the subject, asking about her favorite songs. She let it go, though the moment stayed with her. Later that night, as she hummed softly while dusting shelves, she turned and caught him watching her with an expression she couldn't quite read. There was admiration in his eyes, yes, but also something heavier, something he wasn't saying. She felt her heart skip but forced herself to keep working, not wanting to read too much into it. As the weeks passed, their bond grew deeper. Maria found herself thinking about him even when she wasn't in the building. She wondered about his life, his dreams, and why someone like him spent so much time with someone like her. She didn't dare to call it love yet, but the feelings stirring in her heart were undeniable. What Maria didn't know was that Daniel was struggling too. He had never met anyone who treated him so naturally, without the weight of his title hanging between them. For once, he wasn't the CEO, the man with responsibility and power. He was just Daniel, a man who could share bread, listen to a song, and laugh without pretense. He didn't want to lose that. He didn't want her to see him differently. But secrets have a way of rising to the surface, and Maria's simple world was about to change in ways she couldn't imagine. Maria had grown used to her evenings with Daniel. Every night seemed to bring something new, another story, another laugh, another quiet moment shared in the silence of the great building. She never asked too many questions about who he was or what he did, because the way he looked at her made her feel like she mattered. That was enough. But life has a way of changing when we least expect it. One evening, when Maria arrived for her shift, she noticed the building was busier than usual. Cars lined the front entrance, and people in sharp suits hurried through the doors. Security was tighter, and she saw men with earpieces scanning the lobby. It was nothing like the quiet nights she had grown accustomed to. Clara's supervisor quickly told her that there was a major corporate meeting happening upstairs, and everything had to be spotless. Maria nodded and pushed her cleaning cart toward the elevator, her heart beating a little faster. She had never seen the building so alive at night. She wondered if Daniel would appear or if tonight was different. On the top floor, she entered the grand boardroom with her mop and cleaning supplies. The long wooden table gleamed under the chandelier, and rows of chairs were perfectly aligned. But instead of silence, the room buzzed with voices. Important-looking men and women filled the seats, talking in low tones, flipping through papers, and setting up laptops. Maria lowered her eyes, reminding herself to stay invisible, just as Clara had taught her. She moved quietly along the edges of the room, picking up cups, wiping surfaces, and trying not to draw attention. She had almost reached the door when she heard a voice that froze her in place. "Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for being here tonight. Let's begin." Her eyes lifted on instinct. At the head of the table, dressed in a tailored suit that seemed to fit him like it was made only for him, stood Daniel. His hair was neatly styled, his posture straight, and his voice carried authority that filled the entire room. People listened attentively, nodding as he spoke. Maria's breath caught in her throat. For a moment she thought her eyes were playing tricks on her. But no, the same man who had shared bread with her in the quiet cafeteria, who had carried trash bags without complaint, who had laughed at her simple jokes, was standing there as the leader of them all. He was the CEO. The realization hit her like a storm. She felt her knees weaken, her grip on the mop handle tightening so hard her knuckles turned white. Heat rushed to her cheeks, not from admiration but from embarrassment. All this time, she had spoken to him as if he were an ordinary man. She had told him about her life, her struggles, her dreams, not knowing she was opening her heart to the most powerful man in the building. Her instinct told her to run. She turned quickly, trying to slip out of the boardroom unnoticed. But as she reached the door, she heard his voice again, calm, steady, yet filled with a warmth only she could recognize. Maria. Her heart stopped. He had noticed her. Everyone in the room turned their heads toward the cleaner standing awkwardly at the door. She lowered her eyes, murmured a quick apology, and hurried out before she could see their reactions. Out in the hallway, her breaths came fast. She leaned against the wall, clutching her chest. A swirl of emotions raced through her mind: confusion, betrayal, shame. Why hadn't he told her? Why had he let her believe he was just another worker? Had he only been playing with her, entertained by her simplicity? She finished her tasks that night without speaking to him. Even when she saw him walking down the corridor after the meeting, she turned away, pretending to be busy with her card. He slowed for a moment, as though he wanted to approach her, but then let her be. Maria kept her head down until her shift ended, then hurried home, her heart heavier than it had ever been. The following nights were no easier. Maria dreaded going to the building, but Clara still needed her help, so she forced herself to return. Each time, she avoided the places she used to linger, avoided the balcony where they had laughed, avoided the cafeteria where they had shared bread. She wanted to forget the warmth of his eyes, the way he had listened to her, the sound of his laugh. She told herself it was foolishness. He was a CEO, and she was just a cleaner. They lived in different worlds. But Daniel did not give up. On the third night after the meeting, he found her in the lobby, wiping down the marble counters. She tried to slip away, but he stepped gently into her path. "Maria, please," he said softly. His voice no longer carried the authority of a CEO but the sincerity of the man she had first met. She kept her eyes on the floor. "Why didn't you tell me?" she whispered, her voice trembling. He sighed, his shoulders dropping. "Because I wanted to be seen for who I am, not for the title I carry. People treat me differently when they know. They fear me, they flatter me, but they never see me as a person. With you, Maria, it was different. You looked at me and saw a man, not a position. I didn't want to lose that." Her throat tightened as she shook her head. "You lied to me." "I didn't lie," he said quickly. "I just didn't say everything. I'm still the man who carried trash bags with you, the man who listened to your songs, the man who tasted your bread and called it a treasure. That hasn't changed." Maria's eyes burned with unshed tears. She wanted to believe him, but the wall between them felt taller than the skyscraper they stood in. "It does change," she whispered. "You're a CEO, and I'm just me. People will laugh if they even think we spoke like equals." He stepped closer, lowering his voice so only she could hear. "Let them laugh. I don't care about them. I care about you." Her breath caught, and for a moment she met his eyes. They were the same eyes that had watched her hum a song, the same eyes that had softened when she talked about her family. For a flicker of a moment, she almost let herself believe him. But the fear inside her heart was stronger. She turned away, forcing distance between them. "Please, Daniel. Just leave me alone. I can't do this." The hurt in his eyes was clear, but he didn't press further. He nodded slowly, respecting her words, even though his heart clearly resisted them. Then, quietly, he walked away. Maria stood there long after he left, her hands trembling, her chest aching. She had asked him to leave, but her heart whispered something else. Her heart whispered that she missed him already. Maria's heart felt heavy after that night. She tried to convince herself that she had done the right thing by asking Daniel to leave her alone. After all, what future could possibly exist between a CEO and someone like her? They lived in two different worlds, separated not only by money but by expectations, by status, by everything that defined their lives. She told herself to let go of the memories, to stop thinking about the way his eyes softened when he looked at her, or the way his voice sounded when he laughed. But her heart did not listen. Each evening she returned to the building, pushing her cart through the shining hallways. She found herself looking for him. She tried to focus on her work, polishing the floors until they sparkled, dusting the offices until they gleamed, but every corner reminded her of him. The balcony where he had once stood beside her felt empty. The cafeteria where they had shared bread seemed too quiet. Even the simple act of carrying a trash bag reminded her of the way he had insisted on helping her. Days turned into a week, and then two. Daniel did not appear. Maria told herself she should feel relieved, but instead she felt an emptiness she couldn't shake. She realized she missed him, not the CEO in the suit, but the man who had sat with her in silence, who had listened without judgment, who had treated her as though her words mattered. One afternoon, Maria returned home from her bakery shift, tired from kneading dough and serving customers. She sat by the window, staring at the fading sunset, when her younger brother came running in, holding a newspaper. "Maria! Look," he said excitedly, pointing to a picture on the front page. There was Daniel, dressed in a sharp suit, standing beside other powerful businessmen. The article spoke of his achievements, his leadership, his success as one of the youngest CEOs in the city. Her brother's eyes sparkled with admiration. "He's amazing, isn't he? Imagine meeting someone like him." Maria forced a smile, but inside, her heart ached. She whispered to herself, "I did meet him. And I let him go." The next evening, Maria tried to distract herself by focusing fully on work. Clara had returned from her family emergency and had offered to take back her shifts, but Maria insisted on helping a few more nights. She wasn't ready to let go of the building, though she couldn't admit why. That night, as she finished wiping the counters in the lobby, she turned to see a familiar figure walking through the glass doors. Her breath caught. Daniel stood there, but he wasn't wearing a suit. He wore a simple shirt and trousers, just like the first night they had met. In his hands, he carried a small paper bag. Maria froze, unsure whether to run or stay. He approached her slowly, his expression gentle. "I went to your bakery today," he said quietly. "But you weren't there. So I bought this from one of your co-workers." He handed her the paper bag. Inside were 2 pieces of bread, the kind she always baked in the morning. Maria stared at it, her eyes stinging. "Why would you do that?" she whispered. "Because I wanted to remind you," he said softly, "that I'm still the same man who sat here with you, eating bread and laughing at nothing. I'm not just the CEO in the papers, Maria. I'm Daniel. And he hesitated, his voice catching slightly, then continued, "I fell in love with you before you knew who I was. I fell in love with your kindness, your honesty, your laughter. None of that changes because of my title." Tears welled in Maria's eyes. She wanted to believe him, but fear still gripped her heart. "People will never accept it," she whispered. "They'll say I don't belong in your world." Daniel stepped closer, his gaze steady. "Let them talk. People will always have something to say. But they don't live our lives we do. I don't care about their opinions. I care about you." Her chest tightened as his words sank in. For so long, Maria had felt small in the shadow of others, but with Daniel, she felt seen. He had never treated her as less, never laughed at her dreams, never ignored her words. He had chosen to sit with her when he could have been anywhere else. Slowly, Maria lifted her eyes to meet his. And if I make mistakes? If I don't know how to fit in your world? He smiled softly. Then we'll learn together. I don't need you to fit into my world, Maria. I need you to be yourself. That's who I fell in love with. Her heart swelled, and she realized that the wall she had built between them was made of fear, not truth. She had been afraid of what others would say, but love was not about pleasing the world. Love was about two people choosing each other despite everything else. Maria's tears slipped down her cheeks as she whispered, I don't want to lose you, Daniel. He reached out gently, taking her hand in his. Then don't. For the first time in weeks, Maria let herself smile through her tears. She squeezed his hand, feeling the warmth she had missed so deeply. In that moment, the grand lobby, the marble floors, the tall glass walls, all of it faded. There was only him and her, two hearts finally choosing each other. From that night on, their bond grew stronger. Daniel visited the bakery often, sometimes buying bread like any ordinary customer, sometimes just sitting quietly to watch Maria work. At first, people whispered, some with disbelief, others with judgment. But Daniel never let it affect him, and slowly, those whispers faded. Maria, too, learned to stand tall. She realized she didn't need wealth or titles to be worthy of love. Her kindness, her sincerity, her heart, that was enough. And when she walked beside Daniel, she no longer felt small. She felt complete. Their story was not the fairy tale of a rich man sweeping a poor girl into his world. It was the story of two souls meeting in the quiet hours of the night, sharing bread and laughter, and finding love where no one expected it. And so, the simple woman who had once taken her friend's cleaning shift found herself walking hand in hand with the man she loved, the man who, long before she knew his title, had already captured her heart.